kidnapping, dumbness, and prostitutes. These are not words usually associated with St. Thomas Aquinas. He is a doctor of the church and a saint, after all. And all those intellectual people across the internet quote him often and have some pretty mad respect for this saint. But I am no intellectual. Did I just insult myself? I am a storyteller. So instead of diving into the theological and philosophical writings of this very brilliant man, I'm going to tell his story. Stick around because it's a fascinating one and it might surprise you. Thomas was born in a castle. See, we've already started off with some fascinating stuff. He was the youngest son in a well-off family, and back then, the youngest son was expected to be an abbot. But Thomas wasn't supposed to be just any abbot. His parents dreamed of a day that Thomas would be the abbot at Monte Cassino. No, not that. That. He was just 5 years old when he started his education at Monte Cassino. But when a military conflict neared the monastery a few years later, Thomas's parents, probably fearing for his safety, moved Thomas to Naples to continue his education. It was in Naples that Thomas encountered a new religious order, the Dominicans. Dun, dun, dun. Thomas became a Dominican. This wouldn't do. The Dominican order was so new, and just like that other new order, the Franciscans, they came out of their cloistered monasteries, begged for their survival, and preached out in the streets. Back during this time, the early 1200s, this was just weird. And Thomas's family was not going to have it. He was supposed to be an abbot and bring prestige to the family. He was not supposed to be a beggar. This was scandalous. So they did what any family would do if their son had joined the Dominicans. They kidnapped him and held him captive in their castle.
Huh?
But it gets weirder. The family tried to convince Thomas to forget about the Dominicans.
Go back to the plan. Get an education and become a Benedictine abbot that stays put in the monastery.
Now that would bring prestige, stability, and maybe a little political influence to the family. A lot of investment had gone into this son, and by joining the Dominicans, all that would just go to waste. It brought them great shame. To put this in a modern day perspective, this would be like preparing your son to become the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, spending a lot of money on his education, and then instead he decides to join a local soup kitchen. But Thomas had found his vocation, and he was committed to answering God's call. So, two of his brothers did what anyone would do. They hired a prostitute to try to seduce Thomas.
Huh?
The thought here was to break Thomas's vow of chastity, discredit his religious calling, and make it more socially acceptable for him to find a new path. Apparently, it was more socially acceptable to break a vow of chastity with a prostitute than it was to join the Dominicans. Make that make sense. They sent the woman up to his room, and legend has it that he chased her away with a hot fire iron and then was visited by angels who helped him pray for his purity, virtue, and resolve. Talk about affirmation of doing the right thing. Anyway, after over a year of captivity, Thomas's mom realized that nothing they said or did would change Thomas's mind. He was resolved to following the will of God and staying with the Dominicans. Some sources say she just let him go. However, others say she still did not want it to appear as though the family had accepted this decision. So she helped him escape through a window. That way, it would seem like he escaped on his own, because it looked better for the family if they kidnapped him and tried to prevent him from joining the Dominicans than it would of them accepting the fact that he had joined the Dominicans.
Huh?
No awkward transition this time, just an even more awkward interruption of the episode to remind you to like this video, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Also, visit journeytosainthood.com. There's a cool calendar there that you can track all the saints that we've covered on this channel and the days that they are celebrated. And of course, there's a shop and you can buy things. And when you buy things, that helps me on this channel. So I really super appreciate it. All right, back to the episode. Weird transition. Thomas bounced from city to city in his studies, places like Naples, Paris, and Cologne. He absorbed the material so much, listened so intently, that he rarely spoke. This earned him the nickname of the dumb ox. To be clear, dumb here means mute, not stupid. The ox part was a jab at his large weight. So dumb ox basically meant quiet large guy. But at least one scholar recognized something in Thomas. He said, "You call him dumb ox, but in his teaching, he will one day produce such a bellowing that it will be heard throughout the world." This obviously became true, but I would add ages to that. He would be heard throughout the world and the ages. Once he was done with his education, he turned to teaching and writing, and writing and writing and writing. As promised earlier, I'm not going to get into the details of his writing, but I will say that his writings developed philosophy, theology, and the church's teachings. Over the decades, people respected the writings of this theologian, so much so that in 1265, he was summoned to Rome to serve as the papal theologian. But all things must come to an end. In 1273, a sacristan reported that he had walked into a chapel to find Thomas kneeling before a crucifix, crying, praying, and levitating. Yes, levitating. Thomas was having a vision, and in this vision, Christ told him, "You have written well of me, Thomas. What reward would you have for your labor?" Thomas answered, "Nothing but you, Lord." Okay, so what I said about angels being amazing affirmation for what you've been doing, yeah, this puts that to shame. After this exchange, something happened. That's all we really know, because Thomas would never speak nor write of it. In fact, he would not write any more works. In fact, he wouldn't even finish the thought he was in the middle of in Summa Theologica. When begged to return to his work, he said, "I cannot, because all that I have written seems like straw to me." In 1274, while on a journey, Thomas fell ill, possibly of an injury, and never fully recovered. After several days, he received his last rites and prayed, "I receive thee, ransom of my soul. For love of thee have I studied and kept vigil, toiled, preached, and taught." Not long after, Thomas succumbed to his illness. Many think that Thomas Aquinas' story is a story for scholars, but really it's a story for us all. In his early life, Thomas was not famous for his brilliance. He was mocked for his silence. People misunderstood him as the dumb ox. But he kept going through temptation, through ridicule, through captivity and through pressure from people who wanted him to choose a different path. Pride would not get in the way of St. Thomas's love for Christ. It is clear that he was deeply devoted, especially to Christ in the Eucharist, and that his learning was rooted in humility, not ego. So here's the lesson for us all. When life makes you feel like a captive, when you're boxed in by habit, by temptation, by other people's expectations, or by societal norms, choose God. Choose the path that He wills for you. Start small, but start real. Go to Mass. Spend 5 minutes in prayer. Ask God for the virtue by which you're trying to live, especially purity of heart, humility, and the courage to say no to worldly expectations. Even when, no, especially when it will cost you. Aquinas didn't become holy by becoming intellectual. He became holy by becoming faithful, quietly, persistently, and with his eyes fixed on Christ. So, let's all pray the way St. Thomas answered Jesus. Nothing but you, Lord. St. Thomas Aquinas, pray for us.